It's quite hard to believe that this story has become such a focal point for everything that seems to be wrong with this country in a way. You know, we've got people who want the story to be true, we've got people who want the story not to be true, and nobody seems to be able to kind of see the wood for the trees here.
Yeah, it's a real mess. And I think it tells you a lot about our approach to cases like this, because obviously there's a bit of a fever pitch atmosphere because of recent discussions about TV presenters and relationships, and but there is also many cases of people in the public eye who have been wrongly accused and had their careers tragically ended, right, and their name smeared for no reason at all. There's a problem with the way in which we approach these kind of accusations. There's a sort of desire to have a trial by social media, and I think the BBC has probably taken half of the right approach, which is refusing to name anyone until there is proper evidence, and obviously the mess of whatever the Sun has been doing in its reporting of two sides of the same story coming out in the last 24 hours, a difference between the parents and the person in question. So, but at the same time, as you mentioned in your intro to the show, the BBC seems to have taken a very long time to process this. It seems to have been, there's kind of, on the one hand, trying to maintain some level of privacy and protection for its presenter, on the other hand, looking like it doesn't really know what's happening, and that's not helping. That's not being helped by the parents of this person contradicting them in the press constantly. So this is, I think it just tells us something about the way in which we handle these kind of cases and the way in which we approach these kind of cases, which is, it's pretty dysfunctional.
Yes.
There doesn't seem to be that.
And I think some of that dysfunction has been created by the sort of wokist view of the world, oh, hang on a minute, if there has been some wrongdoing, we better protect the person that might have done that wrongdoing, because it might be difficult for them to have to deal with it. Whereas, there was a time before now, if somebody had done something wrong, and I don't mean illegal, I just mean wrong, then, they had to suffer the consequences of what they had done. But now we live in this kind of, victim culture, where even if you're the perpetrator of something wrong, you can also be the victim.
I don't know, Mike, because, Carl Beach comes to mind.
Yeah.
I think that we have to be very, very careful, because there are cases of people in the public eye who have been wrongly accused, and, people in the media, I won't name names, but on a separate channel, have, been in full support of those who have, alleged and accused things.
And wanted it to be, and also wanted it to be true to such an extent that they didn't ask the right questions.
Yes, and certain politicians went along with it, and people's lives were really ruined.
Yeah.
And actually, some individuals died before their names were
absolutely cleared. Unbelievable.
So I am delighted, actually, at least I'm sort of hopeful that there is still people out there who say innocent till proven guilty is a very important part of the justice system. We should as much as anyone, and obviously myself included, I hope everyone heard this story and thought, what an awful thing. They felt for the person, felt for the parent, but then you also, your sort of rational side of you have, that's an emotional reaction, which is a moral one. Then your rational side has to kick in and say, okay, hang on a minute, is this actually true? We should wait until we hear all the facts. And I think there's not enough caution being preached, particularly on Twitter, where I really feel for some of the BBC presenters who have been named over the weekend unfairly. People like Nikki Campbell, Rylan, who, have had a horrible time with people smearing them unjustly. And Jeremy Vine as well. And I think we should take a long, hard look at ourselves and say, is this really how justice is meant to be followed?
But again, that also is a result of the cautionary sort of approach that's been taken by the BBC, because the BBC has basically put those people in that place. Because the problem with not naming someone as the possible centre of an investigation is that suddenly everybody is then at risk of being suspected of being it.
That's true, but I just reiterate again, if this does turn out to be a false allegation, and if it's the case that the Sun hasn't done due diligence, whatever it is, if it turns out that this is another fantasist, which is plausible, it's possible that that could be true, or that there's something more complicated going on, and you have named an individual, in the current climate in which we live, in which rumours and lies stick and people aren't very forgiving, and there's a kind of general sentiment of, oh, no smoke without fire, well, then you will have ruined an individual's life for no reason.
Yeah, that's true.
I'm of the mind that it's best equally, to preach caution.
No, I don't disagree with what you're saying in theory, but the trouble is, in practice, the world doesn't always work like that, because as you've seen, you know, as you said, social media is awash with all sorts of allegations, some of which are inevitably going to prove to be not just wrong, but dangerously wrong. And in the end, they might all be proved to be wrong. But the thing for me is that when something like this happens, you have to take the newspaper also at face value. And the newspaper says that they have got corroboration, says that they've seen evidence, says that the BBC have, in fact, been very, very dismissive of this family's complaint because they didn't do anything about it. And that's the question that will be asked, I would imagine, today of Tim Davie. It should be asked is, you know, who exactly was told about this on May the 19th, and who did they then tell? Because it doesn't look as if anybody did anything. And that in the end is not caution, that is negligence, isn't it?
Well, yes, I mean, look, I'm a journalist. I think trust in the media is very important. But I also think, you know, in particular, The Sun has a particular kind of history of not being trusted on certain issues, and I think that will play into some people's assessment of this story. On the other hand, if there is no truth to it, and there's you know, no evidence, then it would have been quite easy for the BBC to come out and say there's nothing to see here.
Yeah.
Ignore it. I think that, you know, I suppose part of the problem is that there is a nervousness on all sides when approaching these kind of issues, because it's gone wrong so many times in the past, that clarity is lacking. And so maybe this press conference, or Zoom press conference, which seems, you know, rather cowardly, or at least, you know, a bit defensive, yes, from the BBC, will clear up some things.
It's not another great decision.